have a Laney Cub 12R on the bench here, and it's got a curious problem which goes into wild oscillation as you advance the control. Sounds pretty dreadful. It isn't the reverb, and I've checked the valves. It isn't the valve, they're not microphonic, so I need to strip the amp down and have a look, see what's going on. I have the amplifier stripped out of its cabinet and on the test bench, and yeah, it's going to be really awkward to try and work on. I can't get to the back of any of those boards to test anything, and given the level of hum, I was suspecting the HT smoothing caps, or at least perhaps one of them. As you advance the volume, it bursts into oscillation, and it's bang on 5 kilohertz. It's really it's really curious, and I wondered whether it may be one of the HT caps failing and causing feedback. It's certainly not the valves. I've checked those for microphonics. It isn't the valves. Now I can't get to the HT. The only way I can get to the HT rail is actually on the output transformer on the center tap, where the HT is coming directly. So I've hooked up my little substitution box, and I've mounted it on the earth, on the chassis earth. So hopefully that'll be grounded. And if I just bring that back, and what I've discovered is this. So with a 1 microfarad cap, it stops it dead. Now that doesn't suggest to me that the smoothing caps are gone, because they're much larger than that. You know, they're sort of 100 microfarads and 22 mics and things. So I went down a bit further, down to well, basically 10 nanofarads, and the same thing happens, and it stops it dead, and the hum goes away. So the instability I'm now suspecting is possibly caused by an earth fault or a grounding issue. So I need to investigate that next. So I've got my Fluke multimeter, and I've got one side of the probe on the earth terminal, and what I've discovered is that there's actually voltage across the chassis. I'm actually reading 27 volts across the chassis AC between what basically should be these should be grounded. So I'm wondering whether the contacts there are dirty, or whether the earth is faulty, which is a bit unlikely. There's a star washer and things on there. So this is very curious. I'm not quite sure what's going on. So I need to take these out, give them a clean, and see if they're not grounded, because it seems on this circuit that the only grounding point is via the jack socket. Looking at the circuit, that is the only grounding point, so it's very likely that these are not making contact. So I'm going to do that and come back. So I've had the sockets out, I've cleaned the paint around there, and I put them back on, and it's still exactly the same. What I have discovered is that if I ground the socket to the earth point, the noise goes away. So I've got a croc clip lead, and I'm going to set that there, and there's absolute silence. So there's still a grounding issue, and I'm absolutely lost here, because it's a steel chassis, and that is connected. There is definitely a connection between that and ground. There's no issue there. I'm totally lost with this. This is very, very strange. So to prove myself that the earth is good, or at least that mains earth, that should have no relevance for this anyway. That's just the safety earth. But just to make sure that that is grounded, and the point being that when I connect a wire from there to the input, the noise goes away, and it's a steel chassis. How can this be? And I just want to prove to myself that that is a valid connection. So I got my meter connected to it. I'm just going to connect onto the onto the chassis. You can see that's on 0. That's on the 10 ohm range, and it's reading, you know, pretty much 0 when I go on the chassis whenever I touch any metalwork. However, and here's the thing, when I come to the front, when this should be grounded, and touch here, look, there's nothing, and the chassis itself isn't making any difference either. So it's not the connections there. Everything that's metal on the front So this part of the chassis is not actually connected to the back part of the chassis. And I think that's pretty important because it's carrying the main switch and all the grounding for this amplifier, including your input sockets, are on this part of the chassis. And I wonder what's going on. I don't know whether this is welded or whether it's spot welded or whether it's held together with bolts, and maybe it's a split chassis. So I'm going to tip it over and investigate. So this could well be the problem. Chassis is made in two halves. So I think you can see where the problem lies here. The chassis is so heavily painted or plastic coated, I'm not sure what it is. It's a very thick layer, but the two halves, when they join together, they're not making electrical contact. Now I've started scraping the paint off here and all the way down, and the original bolts that were holding it together were all also painted, and there was no way they're going to make any contact. So I'm going to fit plain plated steel bolts with serrated washers as well, and hopefully once I've cleaned a bit of the paint off here, I shall have a good contact there, and then the underside as well. So I've put the amplifier back together. I do seem to have cured the fault. It's now nice and quiet. Just a little bit of smooth noise now with everything flat out. I'm really pleased with that. One other fault I noticed when I was putting this back together and doing some testing was that the main switch itself, because again the plastic coating, this wasn't actually connected to ground. So I've again had to scrape away paint and put a little serrated washer underneath. I wouldn't like that to become live, but other than that, it all seems good. So the final thing we're going to do is an all-important electrical safety check. So I'm going to clip my ground probe on the outside nut of the switch, which we've now cleaned the paint off. And now we'll check for earth bond, and we'll run 25 amps through it. There we are, and that's reading 0.05 of an ohm. Now we'll do insulation resistance. And that's greater than 299 megohms, and now we'll do load and leakage. There we are, and the amp is warming up. It sounds nice and quiet. And above all, it's safe. I've seen a number of forums where the Laney Cub 12R has been flagged up as being noisy, making humming noises, unstable, etc. And this is not an isolated case. And I suspect that there may be quite a few out there which have the same problem as this amplifier, with the two halves of the chassis being isolated by the amount of paint and plastic coating that's on the chassis. Not only does it cause instability and noise, but it also makes it very electrically unsafe. Your input sockets are on this side of the chassis, and the electrical safety earth is on the other half. Your main switch is on this side. Should a fault occur in the switch, should a wire come off, should the transformer short out, then that whole side of the chassis that you're hanging on to with your guitar could become live with possibly fatal consequences. And this is a major manufacturing flaw in my opinion, and I do urge you strongly that if you do have one of these amplifiers and you are getting any issues with it, that you should get it checked out and make sure that it is electrically safe.